Update 2.0 and 2.1 have really made Cyberpunk 2077 one of the best RPGs to ever release. So for any brand new player to Cyberpunk, or if you're returning to Cyberpunk with Update 2.0 and Phantom Liberty still, I thought we'd do an ultimate new player guide that combines all of my Phantom Liberty and Update 2.0 guides into this one video that covers general tips, skills, cyberware, quick hacks, net running, Phantom Liberty changes, and the Phantom Liberty DLC. So let's go. Let me know in the comments what your life path is, and I've got plenty of other Cyberpunk 2077 content on the channel, including a bunch of builds if you're looking for more information about skills and how you should develop your character. I've got heaps of those on the channel as well. But let's start with some mistakes to avoid. The first major mistake is that cyberware is everything now. So previously in all the other updates in OG Cyberpunk, you could kind of get away with not participating too much in the cyberware system because your armor was all linked to your clothes and you find clothes everywhere. So you could sort of organically increase your armor and your resistances via that method, plus the different stat bonuses you can get from that. And then cyberware was sort of like the cherry on top, right? If you wanted to really like make a min-maxed or like really interesting build or use any of, the different unique aspects of cyberware. Now, however, your clothes are just clothes and everything else comes from cyberware, that being all of your stat bonuses from the different pieces of cyberware and your armor. And the armor is the critical one here. So as part of your general gameplay loop now, every so often, like every couple of levels or so, you should be returning to a Ripper dock so that you can improve your cyberware, increase your armor, whether that be by increasing the tier of your new cyberware pieces, which you can do, or just like adding different pieces to your set. Now, I'll have a full video breaking down like the best cyberware pieces and the different ways of how this whole system now works, but I just wanted to point out here that I was completely ignoring cyberware because on basically every other playthrough, it was a little while before I even invested into cyberware. Like, I'd get up a few levels, get a fair amount of eddies, and then eventually I'm like, all right, I'll go to a Ripper dock and actually invest in this system. But now, like, the Ripper docks are a critical part of the gameplay loop and you need to go there. And they also have expanded inventories with not only a bunch of the newer cyberware stuff that will give you passive stat modifiers, but also can attune to specific attributes. Like it can attune to, say, reflexes to give you like extra X per attribute point that you have invested into that attribute. So pay attention to these different cyberware pieces and how they're actually going to help out your build and also increase your armor. Now you can do this via the reflexes attribute, as well as the reflexes tree does have a lot of attributes linked to cyberware, including increasing the amount of cyberware slots you can actually have, plus your capacity, plus your armor. So if you want to invest further in that system, then definitely invest in the reflex tree, but you should be returning to a Ripper dock often to increase your armor because it's so critical to your overall survivability, especially now that combat's actually harder with the enemy AI changes. Invest in your build with the build planner. So CDPR's build planner is actually an amazing resource, and once I had access to Update 2.0, I continued to use the build planner because there's a few reasons for this, right? So the main reason being how perks work now, in that, so as before, when you level up, you get an attribute point and a perk point, and you can find perk points via other methods as well. But when you're deciding where to put those attribute points, you need to think about the different perk thresholds. So for each of these skill trees at level 4, 9, 15, and 20, you will unlock that next tier of perks. So in the early stages of the game and up until, about like level 20, 30, etc., you'll be wanting to invest those attribute points into 1 or 2 trees so that you can unlock those higher levels of perks. And the same goes for your actual perk points, because to unlock, as you are progressing through those perk trees, to unlock the higher points in those trees, you need to have invested in the lower points and then connect them up, right? So you want to be investing in maybe 1 or 2 attributes first and then spreading the wealth around, and trying to avoid that sort of like decision paralysis where you're not really sure exactly what you want to invest into and you're sort of like spreading those attribute points and perk points around. So having a clear view around what your build's going to be and what you're trying to focus on is really important, especially with the skill changes as well. So now there's only 5 skills, being Headhunter, Netrunner, Shinobi, Solo, and Engineer. Now all of these are linked to using the skills in the world. So Headhunter is sort of like your, hitting headshots and a little bit of that stealth aspect. You've got Netrunner, which is all of your quick hacks, that sort of a thing. Shinobi is using bladed weapons. Solo is like blunt and like body focused. And Engineer, I'll be honest, I haven't exactly figured out how to directly increase yet. I'm assuming it's linked to like tech weapons, but I mostly only increase it from finding the perk shards or the skill shards that you find in the world. But if you guys know exactly how to increase Engineer, do let me know in the comments down below. All right, Next, let's talk about weapons. So weapons have changed. Now, occasionally you'll actually find broken weapons. When you defeat enemies, their weapons will be broken. This is a economy like mechanic so that you don't pick up all the weapons and sell them, because pro tip, the weapons are worth a ton of money, and it's a great way to make money is by selling them. So anytime that you find, higher tier weapons, definitely pick them up and sell them. But also the main thing that you will be looting is like crafting resources and weapon mods and the occasional like quick hack mods. And then there's some other like shards that you can get for various buffs as well. But the one thing I wanted to point out here is just how that economy of picking things up has changed, because you're not really going to be picking up clothes all the time because they're not really necessary, because clothes now are just cosmetic. You don't need them for your overall like build and increasing your power. So when you're looking for different weapons in the world, or whether you're buying them and what have you, you'll mostly be finding weapon mods. Now you should still be modding your weapons, and that process hasn't changed in Cyberpunk Update 2.0. So when you go into the menu, you can then go into the weapon modding screen there and be able to actually add these mods to the weapons. You can only add mods that are of the same tier or lower than the actual weapon itself. You can't add like a tier 3, tier 4 mod onto like a tier 1, tier 2 weapon, if you get what I mean. Speaking of buying weapons, there are many things that you can buy in Cyberpunk 2077 before Update 2.0 and in Update 2.0. Now there are new cars, plus a new car terminal that you can buy cars from, and there's also apartments which come in a couple of updates if you haven't played in a while. It's extremely tempting to buy apartments and cars and all of that stuff in the early stages of the game, but you really need to save those eddies for, you could buy weapons, right, if you wanted to, but you will find some pretty solid weapons out in the world, plus the iconics you'll find out in the world. But the main reason here is definitely the cyberware, right? So we touched on it earlier, but cyberware is such an expensive system to invest in, and it makes a huge difference to your build, your survivability, and general like flow and pacing of the game. So just highly recommend saving those eddies for that sort of a system. Now, if you're looking to make eddies, probably the best way is by doing the NCPD hustles. Now, these you can find on the map literally everywhere, and they're just like very short encounters that you go to. You just blast away some tombs, and then you take whatever is left on their corpses and like pick up whatever item that you need to do. You'll get some experience from this. You'll get some street cred, which you absolutely need street cred. So the higher your street cred, the less you actually have to pay vendors, because it reduces, you get like a discount for the higher tiers of street cred, but it also unlocks higher tier gear at any of the vendors as well. So increasing that street cred is absolutely something that you should be doing. And you can then pick up any of the other things you find. Like you'll often find like money shards or skill shards on the corpses now as well. You can then take anything from those corpses and go and sell them. And gigs are also great exactly for this. So they're a little bit longer than NCPD hustles, but they typically are self-contained to like one area, whereas side quests are often will see you go to multiple locations. So you can sort of arrive here and complete whatever you need to do. I would highly recommend to just kill everyone, because you get a ton of XP from doing it. Plus you can loot their corpses for money shards, skill shards, eddies, all that good stuff. And at the end of the gig, you'll get your eddies reward anyway. Like the only time I wouldn't kill everyone is if the gig specifically demands you to do it in a certain way. But you can try and get around that if you don't want to do it that way. And the last major tip here is the crafting system. So the crafting system is still in Cyberpunk. It's just no longer like in the main menu screen. You'll find this via the inventory screen on the bottom right. There is crafting, and you can click here and go into it. Now, the main reason to even think about this, and it's always been the same in Cyberpunk, is to upgrade your favorite weapons. So you can actually upgrade iconic and just like general weapons that you've added mods to that you really like, and increase their actual tier to be a higher tier, all the way up to like legendary tier 5 and plus. So every time you upgrade a weapon, it'll either go from say tier 1 to tier 1 plus, and then if you upgrade it again, it goes to tier 2, and then tier 2 plus, and then tier 3. This will upgrade the weapon's stats and everything that's on it, and it's really good for the iconics. You'll often find iconic weapons that are, say, at like tier 3, like they're blues or even purples, so you will want to be upgrading them to the legendary tier to get those bonuses, as they're well worth doing. And then it's a good way to spend any of those crafting resources that you're picking up throughout the world now, is they're the main things you'll be picking up from corpses, is those crafting resources and finding them around in different chests and that sort of thing, because you won't be finding, clothes and weapons as often, as they seem to have been tapered back a little bit in favor of actually just finding these resources. Now you can also break down any weapons and things that you find into their actual resources as well if you don't want to sell them, but would recommend to sell them unless you're specifically gearing towards like doing certain upgrades, just because they're worth so much money. But you can also craft ammo in here, so if you are stuck without ammo, you can go into the crafting system and create your own ammo there. You don't have to go and find it throughout the world or go and buy it from vendors, so it's worth pointing that out too. So firstly, let's talk about the changes overall to the progression system. So nothing has changed with how you level up. You'll gain an attribute point and a perk point. Then you can spend those attribute points in any of the 5 attributes from body, reflexes, technical ability, intelligence, and cool. The perk points can then be distributed into those attribute points skill trees underneath the attribute themselves. So say if you want to be really good at shotguns, you would invest in the body attribute and then pick the shotgun related perks. What's different here though is that each attribute now only has 1 perk tree, and it isn't separated between their 3 skills that they sort of increase, right? Like originally, say for body, using that as an example again, it was athletics for your general like physical body upgrades, annihilation for your shotguns and LMGs, and street baller for your blunt weapons. Now it's just under the 1 skill tree, but they're still sort of separated in that way. Like you've got the annihilation perks on the left, and then in the center is like athletics, and then on the right is like the street brawler. And all of the attributes are kind of in this same way, but then there's some crossover between them. Like some of the skills you'll need on like both lines of the trees to like unlock them. The main thing to think about when putting attributes into these attribute slots is the different unlock thresholds, and they are level 4, 9, 15, and 20. So in each of these attributes, if you want to min max, you'll either want to stop leveling that attribute at either level 4, 9, 15, or 20, or continue leveling it to hit that next threshold, because each of those thresholds will unlock the next tier of perks in that specific attribute. In the attributes as well, there is still a skill progression rewards. These are increased by using that actual skill in the world, and then you'll get like progressive bonuses and rewards by increasing those skills. So the max for those skills are the same as your attributes. Say if your body attribute is 15, then the max for that skill is 15. Now these work a little differently apparently in update 2.0. I myself haven't actually used it, but I have seen people talk about how these are different. They have been reworked to have different like skill progression rewards, and it's a little bit different in terms of its upgrades. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how that works. In all of the skill trees as well, there is now a vehicle perk like specific to that attribute, because vehicle combat is now a major part of the game. And if you're planning to play on an existing character, you can respec your perks as you currently can in the game. Like at the bottom left, it does cost you eddies. Apparently in Phantom Liberty, you can also respec your attributes, but that's not 100% confirmed. We will have to wait to confirm that. So now what we'll do is go through each of these categories and talk about what it does and some key new perks that you should grab generally or for some sort of specific builds. Body determines your raw physical power and fortitude. So progressing this line is for your shotguns, your light machine guns, your blunt weapons, and then also for your overall physical aspects, like increasing your health, regen, that sort of a thing. Each point in body will give you +2 to your max health, and for only investing for body, you can get Painkiller, which unlocks slow HP regen in combat, plus its secondary perks, which will further increase that overall HP regen depending on scenarios that you're actually doing. At body level 9, you can get Wrecking Ball, but the main thing here is the level 2, which allows you to barrel into enemies while sprinting and blocking with a blunt weapon. Now we saw this in the trailers of this actually being used in combat. Obliterate is also great. So this is a level 3 perk on spontaneous obliteration for shotguns. So the ability to sometimes instantly kill and dismember enemies at low health, which sounds like a ton of fun. The main thing I think that any like general build will pick up in this sort of a line is going to be Adrenaline Rush. So essentially what this does is it's similar to like the Adrenaline Rush that's already in the game, except adrenaline will give you various buffs, and it is triggered by using blood pump, cyberware, and health items that will then trigger those effects. So you can add something like Unstoppable. So when Adrenaline Rush is active, gain immunity to movement penalties and non-damaging status effects, or just overall movement speed and damage with Juggernaut or Calm Mind so that it lasts longer. And then if you completely max out your body, you could get something like Pain to Gain. So when Adrenaline Rush is active, plus 20% item recharge after neutralizing an enemy. So there's plenty of really interesting perks in this line if you wanted to focus on those abilities. And the one thing that I will also mention that was shown in the trailers too is Quake. So at level 3 for Quake, you can then gain the ability to do that like AoE ground pound on the ground. Reflexes determines your maneuverability and ability to evade enemy attacks. Now progressing through this tree will give you a 0.5 crit chance for every attribute point, and it will also increase your overall effectiveness with the assault rifles, the submachine guns, and blades, and enable you to do like general fast combat actions like dashes and air dashes and that sort of a thing. So those dashes and air dashes are definitely important. Now you can get dash at 9 for the threshold and then air dash at 15, and air dash will allow you to dash during the air, but you will need to level 3 that, whereas air dash you only need level 2, and that'll just allow you to dash by pressing control. Another interesting perk is Lead and Steel, which will unlock the ability to block incoming projectiles with blades, and this will consume stamina, so essentially allowing you to like deflect bullets. And then as you progress through this line, you'll get like the finisher from Blade Runner or Slaughterhouse. So all attacks, counterattacks, and deflected bullets apply bleeding, which increases dismemberment chance. Bleeding cannot kill enemies, but does make them more susceptible to finishes. So an insane level of perks there by allowing you to deflect that damage and then also apply bleeding effects. For the more like sharpshooter weapon focused, you've got sharpshooter. So at level 3 here, each successful shot grants a stack of sharpshooter, which increases your stamina regen, and you can then use this like sharpshooter effect to gain additional benefits based on the secondary perks there, or salt in the wound and submachine gun fun. Technical ability is described to increase your technical know-how, but that's kind of doesn't make sense. But essentially the main thing here is explosives, tech weapons, and cyberware are the main things that you need to think about. So while the tree on the left is generally focused on using your explosives in combat and increasing your overall explosive power, what I think is the coolest thing about this tree is licensed to Chrome. So it'll increase your overall cyberware stats plus your armor, and at level 3 it unlocks a new cyberware slot for the skeleton. All skeleton cyberware have boosted stats. The secondary perk here, ambidextrous, will unlock a new cyberware slot for your hands, and then you've also got the built different, which unlocks another cyberware slot. So if you're looking to really max out your cyberware, you'll need these perks, plus then getting edge runner, which is obviously clear where that inspiration comes from, is David Martinez, but then that will allow you to push that cyberware capacity even further, like above that threshold, in favor of losing some maximum health. And then you can even enter that state of fury, so you do increase damage, have increased critical hit chance and critical hit damage for a period of time. For the more weapon, like tech weapon focused users, you've got bolt, which is a really interesting stat or skill here, which will at level 3 unlocks bolt shots. So you can fire a bolt and release the trigger for a charge shot right before the fully charged effect, and it will deal additional damage and penetrate cover, as well as all tech weapons do. And then you can increase it or buff that with chain lightning, so your bolt effects will actually do electrical damage, releasing an electrical arc that can electrocute nearby enemies. So really cool there for both the tech and the cyberware changes for the technical ability tree. It's definitely going to be a tree that I think everyone is going to invest in for those cyberware upgrades for sure. Intelligence determines your net running capabilities and also your smart weapons, but primarily on your net running. Now, at every attribute level here, you will gain +1 max RAM, and that RAM is hugely important for basically all the skills in this line. Now, generally speaking, everything here is just focused on the hacking. There isn't anything like critical to call out other than the hack queue. So at level 2, this unlocks Quickhack queues, allowing you to stack hacks, which we did see in the new trailers, so you can like combo hacks together by stacking them. Then you can further progress this with the different upgrades on its side, plus then queue acceleration to make that queue a little bit faster, or even then into queue mastery, again just like pushing that faster. One of the perks I would grab regardless of your build, but even just like at intelligence level 4, is the car hacker. So it unlocks vehicle quick hacks, allowing you to remotely take control of cars, set off alarms, and even explode them. Great for like a stealth build, even just great for car combat, right? Being able to just remotely detonate them sounds like a great time. And if you are sort of into the smart weapons line, you've got the smart weapons line here on the right, which is mostly focused around like being able to let you transfer that target lock comfortably without having to, you know, if you reload, you don't lose that target lock, or you switch weapons, that sort of a thing, and just increasing your overall prowess with the smart weapons. Cool determines your assassination skills and stealth abilities. Now, for every attribute point here, you gain +1.25 critical damage. So in the cool tree on the right, you've got the focused on using, say, knives and throwable weapons and increase your critical hit chance or cooldowns with those sort of weapons, and as well as adding some sort of poison damage. I would also consider at level 4 for cool, anyone can grab this, grabbing Road Warrior. So it allows you to use the Sandevistan to slow down time while driving, or allows the Kereskov to be activated when aiming and handbraking simultaneously. Really cool effect, like using the Sandevistan in combat to like, you know, be able to do some drifting and stuff. Sounds like a fun time. Also, ninjutsu here at level 15 will increase your movement speed and mitigation chance, but at level 3 it unlocks the ability to sprint while crouching, which would be great for any sort of a stealth build to focus on there. And then if you're losing, say, pistols, revolvers, precision rifles, or sniper rifles, Deadeye is the way to go. So at level 3 here, this unlocks the Deadeye mode, which is active above 85% stamina, and when active increases your headshot damage and your weak spot damage, and has no weapon spread, which is a massive buff. And then you can improve it even further with the perks on the side, or going even further with nerves of tungsten steel, so you get guaranteed critical hits and headshots, that sort of a thing. And it's really powerful to go into that line, I think, and I can't wait to experiment with doing some sort of a pistol build with Johnny's pistol as like the Deadeye. The new relic skill tree is very, very different to the others. So in this line, you don't actually actually invest attribute points like you do in the others. You instead have relic points, which it seems to be some sort of a currency like perk points. Exactly how you get these, we don't rightly know at this minute, but you can bet that I'll have a video explaining all of this and all of these different perks once we do have all of that information. Something to point out here is that the major nodes like say jailbreak, emergency cloaking, and vulnerability analytics all cost 3 relic points. So you've got a maximum of 15 relic points you can spend, and investing in those you can see will drop me down to 6 because they all cost 3. The secondary perks here only cost 1. So by investing in emergency cloaking and then sensory protocol, you can see I'm down to 11. The one thing I think everyone's going to invest in is jailbreak. So this unlocks new abilities with the arm cyberware, the mantis blades, the gorilla arms, and the projectile launch system and monowire. And essentially you can read what these different abilities do, but they are different for each of these abilities. So they unlock new effects for them, and then the secondary perks are specific to each of those cyberware models, right? So say if you've got spatial mapping or leap attacks with the mantis blades now cripple enemies and increase dismemberment chance, or say if you're going something like the gorilla arms, the limiter remover, so the shockwave from the charged gorilla arm attacks now knock down all enemies within range. So you can see what the different effects do there, but they are different depending on the actual cyberware you have equipped. And then if you've got say like a stealth build, you probably go something like the emergency cloaking to improve your optical camo cyberware, or you could then, if you're using say weapons, just like general ranged combat, vulnerability analytics. So during combat you can now detect vulnerabilities in enemies armor and cyberware. Hitting vulnerabilities gives a 100% crit chance plus 25% armor penetration weak spot damage bonuses, and then you can buff both of these even further with say machine learning for the vulnerability analytics or sensory protocol for the emergency cloaking. So you've got different playstyles you can sort of go into with the different relic line, but you can seemingly get every single perk here. You've got just enough relic points, but exactly how we get those we'll have to wait and see, and I suspect it will be hard to invest into this system because they're probably going to be quite expensive. So we'll start with how the new system works. So essentially the main difference here is it is now a risk versus reward sort of system. So the main category is on the left, which is the cyberware capacity. And this is the amount of cyberware that your body can actually handle at any given time. There are ways you can increase this limit just by simply leveling up and acquiring certain perks like the Renaissance Punk or the Edge Runner, or by cyberware capacity shards that you may find throughout the world. And these are just random, like you'll find shards on different corpses. Occasionally you'll get a cyberware capacity shard that will increase your overall capacity. The next is on the right hand side, which is your armor, and this is your resistance to damage as you would expect, but it is no longer tied to clothes. It is tied to cyberware that can be increased via the skeleton and integumentary system. I'm definitely saying that wrong. And you can also increase it via perks like the License of Chrome perk. There are certain clothings that will still give you a little bit of armor, like if it's actually, like armor clothing, it'll give you some armor rating, but for the most part it comes from these two cyberware systems plus some others that can give you a little bit of extra armor if you need it. Now there are perks in the technical ability tree that will benefit you from cyberware. So if you want to become a David Martinez style and really invest into the cyberware system, then you really need that technical ability attribute for that reason. And the actual cyberware themselves, like the items, have been completely reworked as well. So now cyberware will have an attunement stat. So any piece of cyberware you look at, it'll say like body attuned, reflex attuned, tech attuned, etc. And you will get a bonus for the amount of attribute points you have in that attribute when you're using that piece of cyberware. So you can really customize and min-max your build by, say, if you've got a really high technical ability and then focusing on technical ability attuned cyberware in that way. And you can also now increase the tiers of your own cyberware. So rather than say buying a new piece of cyberware, you could just increase the tiers of it if you like it by upgrading it. And then you can also change the secondary stat modifiers that are on them as well if you so choose to when you are upgrading. So those components that you find throughout the world now are super important for the cyberware system. So you can upgrade to say tier 5 and tier 5++ to really get the most benefits out of this system. And the last thing is that the higher your street cred, the less you have to pay when buying cyberware as well. So make sure you're maxing out your street cred for that. And then the higher tiers of cyberware gear is actually now linked to your level. So the higher your level, the higher quality cyberware will become available. Same with all the other shops as well. All right, let's go through all the categories now. We're going to start with the frontal cortex. Now this improves the use of quick hacks and decreases cooldowns. This is mostly beneficial for, say, intelligence builds that use a lot of RAM and quick hacks, as a lot of these Cyberware modifications are all sort of based around that. There is some flexibility for other builds, but if you're looking for those other builds, consider the attribute attunements here and see that they're actually benefiting you. If you're not using intelligence and actually using, say, a cyber deck, then you probably won't invest too much into frontal cortex, as it's mostly passive bonuses for, say, RAM and quick hacks and that sort of a thing. Arms is one you absolutely will invest a lot into regardless of your build, as this is like combat Cyberware focused. So this is your gorilla arms, your mantis blades, your monowire, and your projectile launch system. Now you will essentially pick which one of these four that you like depending on what sort of a build that you are running and what you want to use, but it's also more flexible now with 2.0. So because of the way that the attunement works, you can find, say, gorilla arms that are attuned to intelligence if you like, or something like mantis blades or monowires are attuned to, say, using reflexes, different sort of range builds. You're not sort of locked into using like the projectile launch system for a range build like you may have been before update 2.0. You can do some sort of interesting combinations there. So see what they're actually attuned to and see if you want to grab a arm that is, say, toxic or have, say, thermal effects on it as well, which you can do, and upgrade them obviously through the upgrade system, because they're one of the primary Cyberware systems that you'll be using depending on whichever one you want to use. And we'll cover like these in much more depth when we go into like some build videos for like the gorilla arms, mantis blades, monowire, projectile launch system, all that stuff. But overall here, it's really dependent on your build and how you want to play, but just pay attention to those attunement stats. Skeleton is one that everyone will invest into because it increases your armor and overall defense. So this is the one that everyone will invest in, especially maybe first, like anytime you make those early game Cyberware purchases, it's probably going to be in the skeleton tree because that is your armor, especially to increase the tier with those crafting components in the early stages of the game is highly beneficial to increase your overall armor and survivability. Now, a lot of the Cyberware here is, and its modifiers are mostly focused on like melee builds or, say, carry capacity. If you're like looking to spec into like a melee build, whether that be with like blades or a blunt weapon or gorilla arms, mantis blades, etc., you probably will want to invest a lot into the skeleton line because of that armor and overall defense. The options here, like there isn't really necessarily like a best option. It's just dependent on whatever gives you the most armor, or say if you're focusing on a melee build, then go those routes. But as long as you're getting armor value out of your skeleton Cyberware, you're going to see success. Nervous system, however, is really cool. And this is your time slowing effects and like detection for enemies. Now this is mostly, say, like cool and reflexed attuned items, but the Korenzakov that slows time can now be activated while driving with the Road Warrior perk. And it's also a great Cyberware option, as when you, say, dash or slide or dodge, by aiming you can slow down time to make sure you land your shots. But there are other options like the Synaptic Accelerator, which will slow down time when enemies detect you, or something like the Reflex Tuner, which will slow down time when your health drops low. The one thing I'd pay attention to here is just whatever the item you're equipping is actually attuned to for those extra bonuses, but essentially it's just what you want to slow down time for, right? So if it's enemy detection, you're probably focusing on like a stealth build. If it's while you're like sliding or dashing, it's probably a reflex focused range build. Just depends on what the goal is for your overall setup. Next is the integumentary system. Now this improves your armor and damage resistance, very similar to the skeleton. For the most part here, everything in this line is invested in just increasing that overall armor capacity that you do have. Now there is one option here like the optical camo, which will have perks that are linked to it for, say, stealth builds that make you a little bit invisible if you wanted to go that route. Plus in the new relic skill tree for the expansion, there are skills linked to optical camo as well if you wanted to go that route. But here you're essentially just looking at ways to increase your armor, whether that be from just the straight up subdermal armor or grabbing something like the defense Kakov that'll increase your mitigation chance as well. So that's like other ways of improving your resistance, or pain editor to reduce all incoming damage. Operating system is a big decision, just like arms. So there are really three options here, but essentially what this will do is define your build to some degree. So the first option being Cyber Deck, which is the one that you typically start with. Now this gives you the option to scan and quick hack, and it's heavily linked to the intelligence tree and the intelligence perks. And this is the, overloading and overheat and all those different sort of effects that you can apply to enemies just via bringing up your scanner. Now, if you're not investing in the intelligence tree, you probably won't use a Cyber Deck, but Cyber Decks can be extremely powerful, especially now that you can stack hacks with the new perk tree. Absolutely worth investing into if that is the route you're going. But if you're not actually investing in intelligence, or you don't want to do any scanning and hacking, you've got two options, being the Sandevistan and the Berserk. The Sandevistan is the one that you're probably most familiar with if you have watched the anime, and essentially this allows you to slow down time and get various buffs for a period of time while this is active. Now, just like the Kerenskakov with the Road Warrior perk, you can activate this while driving and just get like a slow-mo effect to like get around corners and do that sort of cool stuff and just do cool drifty things. Now, there's also the Berserk, which will give you major resistances and a HP buff for a limited period of time, and it's also activated via pressing E. Now, this is really like a core decision for your build and your overall play style, so it's whatever of these benefits you the most. If you're going a melee route, Berserk is definitely the option that I would go for because of the extra health and resistances buff that you get from it. Just makes a lot more sense. But the Sandevistan also works there because slowing time, right? Enemies can't hit you if you're like zooming around the battlefield, but then any sort of, say, stealth build or even some sort of range build to some degree, you could get away with using the Cyber deck for those scanning and different effects you can get from it. But it's really dependent on your build. All three options are fantastic now with the new Cyberware changes. The face Cyberware improves your vision and allows you to highlight environmental clues. Now, that highlighting is like specific things in the environment depending on the optics you have equipped. This could be highlighting enemies, it could be highlighting traps. The main decision you'll make here is what you want to highlight in combat. For me, it's highlighting enemies. I just find that to be the most simple option so I can actually see where enemies are. But if you're going like a stealth option, something that can highlight cameras and turrets could be beneficial then, so you actually know where those cameras are so you can switch them off and not get seen. But in this category, any option is really good. It's just whatever you specifically want to highlight that you want to know about when you're actually in combat or stealthing around. I would pay attention to the attunement here to make sure it's attuned to a stat or attribute that you are actually invested into. Hands is next, and you may notice there is an additional hand slot now, which is unlocked via the ambidextrous perk in the technical ability line. There are a few options here, but you're really going to pick between two, and that's the ballistics, compressor, and smart link, or you could have both if you have the ambidextrous perk. But what these do is the ballistics compressor will allow you to see the trajectory of the ricochets from power weapons. So in real time, when you're like aiming down sights with a power weapon, how they can ricochet off the ground as they hit targets, you can actually see if they're going to hit the targets or not. Hugely beneficial buff, plus it increases that ricochet damage as well, and you can do this around corners or just literally shoot at the ground, so you don't have to aim at enemies. It's really fun to do. Also, smart link is essentially like the same thing but for smart weapons, so it'll actually allow you to use that like smart targeting system that'll auto lock onto enemies, so you can then shoot them with that, and it gives you buffs to, say, crit damage and all those different effects from using them as well. But depending on which option you're going here, just make sure it's attuned to the right stat, whether that be technical ability or intelligence for smart weapons or reflexes, what have you. But they're the two main options you'll go with, but there are other options if, say, you wanted to focus on a different sort of a build, like increasing crit chance with handle wrap or something like that. Circulatory system affects your stamina and health regen and just overall survivability. There's plenty of really good options in here, but three that I'll call out is biomonitor, so it will give you an auto heal when your HP gets low, so you won't have to worry about like popping a health item when that triggers. You've also got heal on kill, so when you kill an enemy, you heal. That's pretty self-explanatory. And blood pump functions as a healing item, and it's a really powerful option that doesn't ever run out because it's, you know, in your body, but it'll just be on a cooldown. So all these plus the other options in this line are all fantastic, and for the most part, you'll invest more in this system if you're in a melee build because it is about that sort of survivability in combat. But you're grabbing something like heal on kill or biomonitor just for that extra survivability for any build is absolutely beneficial to grab, as long as you're not going over your cyberware limit. The last category is legs, and this is my favorite category. So this improves your mobility and it can slightly increase your armor as well. This is a personal preference choice here because all the options will give you some sort of a movement ability. For example, Link's Paw will improve your stealth, or you could go something like reinforced tendons, which will give you essentially like a double jump because you can jump in the middle of the air, or like the charge jump, like the extra jump from fortified ankles, or you can get like an extra increased sprint speed with Jenkins tendons. But essentially for me, it has to be reinforced tendons. I just love the feeling of double jumping in like any game, and it just feels really smooth here. Without double jumping in Cyberpunk, I feel like something is missing. So the first thing I always do in like any build, even before update 2.0, was go and grab reinforced tendons for the double jump. So consider what option you want to grab here, and obviously the attunement is important, and you can improve this here to change the different status effects because there isn't like heaps of options, and improving it by increasing its tier will give you a little bit of extra armor, plus you can get better stat modifiers on them, which for the most part here, because there's only really the 4 different options, the stat modifiers that you get, like those secondary stats might not benefit your build. So actually upgrading them and then changing those modifiers to something that benefits you is something that you should do. So let's talk about the changes generally and some things to avoid. So no longer can you breach protocol enemies. You can only breach protocol, the actual like jack in things that you jack in to like get diamonds and quick hack parts. But some quick hacks have also been renamed or like changed in their effects. Like say whistle is now bait, but it still does the same thing. Like it baits enemies towards you. RAM cost across the board has been adjusted to be more relevant to the effects of the quick hack. The best example of this is that all of the ultimate quick hacks are now super expensive, but you can alleviate this with the overclock perk, which allows you to activate and use your health bar as additional RAM. So that's kind of how it's balanced now if you are choosing to do that. Because of the introduction of Cyberware capacity and how critical some of the Cyberware is for any sort of netrunner build, not only do you need to max out your intelligence stat, you also need to max out, or at least get to 15, your technical ability stat now in any netrunner build to grab those Cyberware perks, which you'll definitely need so you can then invest in some of the higher tier and quality Cyberware, which you'll need for any sort of netrunner build. Cars can also now be hacked with the car hacker perk, and you need a cyber deck equipped in order to do this, and it's linked to, say, device hack tiers. So now when you're looking at any of the Cyberware, if it's a lower tier piece of Cyberware, you'll only have, say, tier 1 or tier 2. The higher levels will have up to tier 5, and it shows the device hacks that are pre-installed on that cyber deck. So things like breach protocol are always available, but now in these device hack tiers, you've also got the different car hacks that you'll be able to do depending on the tier of your cyber deck. This is also relevant for, say, turrets, as the turret effects are also now listed as these device different tiers. Now, the other difference with these cyber decks is that they now have these 4 different icons up the top. The first icon is the actual Cyberware capacity that it will consume when you have it equipped. The second is the amount of RAM slots that it has. The third is the amount of quick hack slots that it has that you can equip to that cyber deck. And the fourth is the amount of required intelligence in order to equip that cyber deck. All the cyber decks also have different passive effects now as well, so make sure you're reading that white text to make sure you're getting benefits from the actual cyber deck that you are using. Now let's cover all the different categories of quick hacks and the best ones. We'll start with the covert quick hacks. Now this is used for like infiltration scenarios to essentially like sneak into areas and apply quick hacks without being traced. Now, every quick hack now is traceable except for covert quick hacks. You'll notice that when you bring up your like scanner, they will say traceable, but the covert ones will not. You have a few options here. The main one you'll use regardless of your build is ping, as it reveals all enemies. This is great for stealth, and request backup and bait are very similar. Bait will lure a target towards you or lure it towards a camera if you're actually like hacked into a camera at that time, and request backup will lure an enemy towards the person that you have requested backup from. The other two, memory wipe and sonic shock, are similar but different. So memory wipe is super expensive and it prevents the target enemy from noticing you for a short time, and any quick hack applied to that target afterward is not traceable regardless of the quick hack you apply. Now, what I will say here is that sonic shock is actually so much better than this, and it's hands down the one that you should be using. Sonic shock does its own things, but the main thing here is the cloaks the enemy from their allies' sensory systems, causing them to be ignored and scrambling their communication. So they can't communicate with their allies, and it also cloaks them from their allies. Now, the reason that this is beneficial is it's essentially the same thing as memory wipe's ability to avoid being traced. So you can use sonic shock on an enemy, and it is significantly cheaper with its RAM cost, and then you can pop, say, you know, any type of short circuit or contagion, overheat, any of those combat quick hacks to kill that enemy, and the other enemies won't actually be alerted because they were ignoring that enemy at the time that that occurred. So I would always run sonic shock for this reason, so you can then stealthily take out enemies by activating this and then comboing it with, say, short circuit, overheat, etc. Because of the new Q hacking system, you can line these up together and go sonic shock, short circuit, bang bang, take out that target, easy peasy. Moving on to combat quick hacks. So the combat quick hacks are the main ones that you'll use to like deal damage in combat scenarios. Like these have had the least amount of changes of the quick hacks. You've still got the, you know, the best ones like short circuit that deals electrical damage to enemies. It does more damage to robots, drones, and turrets. You've got Overheat, which is just a great fire damage, like damage over time effect. You've got Contagion for poison damage over time that will also spread to nearby targets. Contagion is one of my favorites. I always use this in any sort of Netrunner build. And you've got Synapse Burnout, which will deal heavy damage to the one target plus some other effects if Overclock is active. So interestingly here, like nothing's really changed, right? Like Overheat, Short Circuit, Contagion are all fantastic. Obviously use them. Synapse Burnout is not bad, but considering its high RAM cost and the fact that Short Circuit and sort of Overheat to some degree can one-shot enemies unless you're playing on ultra hard, you're probably going to use those instead. Control quick hacks are not the sexiest category of quick hacks. They seem a little underpowered, but when you think about it, they're actually pretty good, especially with the changes to monowire when you jailbreak it with the Relic perk tree from Phantom Liberty. So as soon as you start Phantom Liberty, you'll get access to the Relic perk tree, which will allow you to jailbreak via the middle perk is one of the first ones you can unlock. And what this does is it gives various buffs to any of the Cyberware attachments. The one that it gives for the monowire is it allows you to add a control quick hack directly into the monowire, and when you deal a heavy attack with the monowire, it will also apply that quick hack to that target. So the options here, because it's control, is cripple movement, Cyberware, malfunction, reboot, optics, and weapon glitch. Any of these are really good, but cripple movement is just tiers above, right? Because when this is applied to enemies, it increases the amount of melee damage they receive by 15%. It also makes them more susceptible to melee finishes, which you can do with the monowire. And after you have performed finishes, you get your health back plus RAM. So by using this to deal a heavy attack to enemies and then dealing a finisher, you get health back, you get RAM back, and you also deal more damage to that target with the monowire. It's like a perfect combination. That's why they are actually really good, and that's also why cripple movement is one of the quick hacks you should absolutely use from the covert category. Cyberware malfunction is okay. Their target will take more damage, and if it's on, say, a Maelstrom, right, it disables their Cyberware, which is really good, especially if you're fighting something that has like a Sandevistan or something like that that's super irritating in combat. Cyberware malfunction can be good for that. Reboot, optics, and weapon glitch, I don't know about these. Like I prefer to use other things. Like I always feel that doing damage with something from a combat quick hack is better than, say, just like stopping them from attacking for a period of time with like weapon glitch or blinding them with reboot optics, because by the time that effect goes off, I've probably already killed them anyway. So I never felt that these two were really worthwhile. The ultimate category is our final category here. Now we did touch on the best way to trigger these, which is by having overclock active, because they have such an expensive cost. The reason they have such an expensive cost is because they are hilariously fun and do a bunch of really good effects. Cyber Psychosis, for example, will just have that target attack anyone in sight, and you can put this on any target, which is fantastic in encounters where there's lots of enemies and you haven't initiated your own combat yet. You can sort of whittle them out by having them fight each other by using that, and then, you know, just detonate some grenades with the detonate grenade quick hack that knocks them out as well. Suicide isn't as good, because if you're using this on like an elite enemy, it actually won't kill them because they have too much health. So they'll still do the thing where they shoot themselves, but they won't actually kill themselves. So it sort of defeats the purpose. System Collapse is actually better because it will knock out that target and crippling them, so they're essentially just like down for that period, which is guaranteed compared to Suicide that like isn't guaranteed. But for the most part here, the two that I would use is Cyber Psychosis, because it's, well, it's fun, but it also will have that enemy die once the allies, well, not their allies, right, you know what I mean, their allies kill them, but also like whittle out anyone that they actually kill during that time frame. And then Detonate Grenade works as well, because it will take out anyone that's in that sort of area when it does detonate, including the target as well. But that is all of the quick hacks and all the changes with update 2.0 that have come to Cyberpunk 2077. This was originally going to be like a stealth Netrunner build video, but I decided not to do that because the loose video will be out on the channel, which is kind of similar, and I wanted to just cover all of the quick hack changes and everything about the quick hacks anyway. So you can definitely just literally turn everything that I've done in this video into a build and you'll have a great time, because quick hacks are still overpowered. You just have to use them right. The same thing with everything in update 2.0. Everything is still very overpowered and super fun. You've just got to get used to the new system. Now, that's the first thing we're going to talk about here, right, is should you make a new character or an existing character? The official stance from CDPR is to make a new character, and that's probably a really good option because of the time delay between Update 2.0 and Phantom Liberty coming out next week. So if you start a brand new character, you'll start, you know, exactly where you typically would. You would pick a life path and start during that life path, and you'll go through the game as you would have before Update 2.0, but now you've got all of those benefits with Update 2.0, from the police changes, the enemy AI, the new perks, the new skill changes. and all of the different gear and upgrades and stuff that has been changed, especially with Cyberware. But there are two other options as well. So one of them is that you can choose the option from your menu once Phantom Liberty launches to start directly from Phantom Liberty. This is technically like starting a new character, as you'll be able to customize your looks and pick your life path still, but you'll be dropped in the world much later. There is a unique intro from Johnny Silverhand that sort of recaps the story up until that point, but you'll start at level 15 with level 15 street cred, 20k eddies, and a pretty solid ranged weapon build with some really good cyberware considering where you typically would have your cyberware at that part of the game. The downside is that you'll miss any iconic weapons or story choices that you can pick up before that point in the main story. Any side quests, gig progression, all of that stuff hasn't been done at all, so you can go and do that. But the only things that you will have missed is any iconic weapons from the main story and any say choices or different decisions that you may have been able to make before that point. So as soon as you spawn in, you'll just immediately start the Dogtown quest, but you could also go off and do the rest of the main story if you wanted to, as you'll have both Ghost Town and Down on the Street main quest to actually go and do, and then obviously all of the side quests and gigs and everything as well. If they were launching at the same time, or you don't have time to play update 2.0 before Phantom Liberty, this is definitely a really good way to start because you've still got the rest of the main story to go, plus Johnny Silverhand gives you a recap of where you're sort of at, and it's about the middle-ish of the main story, so it's not too far. You've still got heaps to be able to do and go and do all the side quests and everything if you want to. The other option is to load an old save, and when you do, you'll get a call from Vic to go and update your cyberware, which you should be doing anyway, but you'll also then, if you have gotten to that point in the main story, you're probably at the end of the main story, right? You'll still get that same call to start the Dogtown expansion as you would if you were starting it from any other new save. Now, the difference here though is that your perk points will actually have been reset because of the massive changes to the perk point system. You'll still have everything else you previously did, plus the same cyberware you would have had equipped. It's just been updated to the new system, but you should definitely go to a Ripperdoc and add, remove, change things because things are very different in the new system. So what's that point in the main story that you have to get to? And it's the mission called Transmission, which is the end of the Voodoo Boys little sort of story arc as part of the main story. So once you've been to Pacifica, done the Voodoo Boys quest, you'll then get a call and Phantom Liberty will then immediately kick off from that point. There is also new content that will start appearing outside of Dogtown once you've started the Phantom Liberty content. So as soon as you have that option available to you, you should dive right in and at least do those first initial missions to then start having that content generate. But don't worry what level you're at or anything like that, as it's the same as the rest of the game. It scales to your level, so you can then dive in as soon or as late as you like, but also just you want to be prepared, right? So make sure that you do at least have a solid build and have upgraded your cyberware and done all of that stuff, because it's definitely important to do. And speaking of those builds, the build planner for that CD Projekt Red has created, you absolutely should be investing in, because the main reason here is that choosing where you're going to put your attributes, right? Because of the new system and the way that it works, there are these perk thresholds of 4, 19, 15, and 20. When you hit that point in your attribute, say you get your attribute to 9 or 15 or whatever, the next tier of perks will unlock for you. So it's not really beneficial to spread your attribute points around, because you won't get access to these higher tier perks until much later once you hit those thresholds. So you should sort of want to pick say one attribute or two attributes in the early game that you really want to focus on, and then get those higher tier perks. And with level 60 being the new level cap, you can max out 3 attributes and get the other 2 to above the level 9 perk threshold. So consider that when deciding what attributes you're sort of picking and where you're going to invest as well. And the last part about that is the skill changes as well. So there's now only 5 different skills that you can invest in, and you'll find skill shards in the world that'll just give you experience for them, but you'll also need to be doing specific actions to actually get these increases, as actually improving your skills and getting these different tier bonuses are kind of like a perk point in their own in some of them, as they give you tangible upgrades. Plus, they're a little bit similar to the old system where, say, you would just be inputting perk points in to get stat increases, that sort of a thing. But they're absolutely worth investing in. Say if you're going to be a shinobi with a sword, then really using that in combat constantly will increase that actual points, and then the more you do that, the better you'll get at actually using that build as well. So we touched on the level 60 being the new level cap, but you should be getting your street cred as high as possible. Not only does a higher street cred unlock higher tier and higher quality gear from vendors, it also gives you a discount from vendors the higher your street cred is, which is going to be a huge buff to you when you get into Phantom Liberty and into the markets there, where there is a ton of stuff to buy, and the cheaper it is, the more you'll be able to buy, because there's going to be a lot in there that you definitely want to get your hands on. There is a ton of good ways to earn XP and street cred and just general loot. Like the NCPD hustles are quick and you get a ton of loot from them, plus you just get to kill the people to get the XP and the street cred and all the loot, so you can hoover up all those weapons and go and sell them for eddies. Weapons are worth a ton of eddies, so selling them is a great way to get eddies. Gigs and side quests are also everywhere. Gigs are much shorter than side quests, as they're typically contained to a single area, so you can sort of arrive and complete them. Those side quests are a little bit more in depth, and they're also good to go just for the general story of it. And because of all the gear changes and how Cyberware works now, with like it being the armor, you won't find clothes as often. You'll still find them in lockers and that sort of a thing, but for the most part you can kind of sell them unless you actually want to wear it as like an outfit. But anytime you have found a piece of clothing, it'll just become part of like your wardrobe, so you'll be able to then like create an outfit with it anyway. Even if you sell that piece of clothing, you just won't have it in your inventory to be able to just like wear manually if you wanted to. But also from say killing enemies and just finding it in the world, you'll find skill shards and money shards as well now. Money shards will just give you an influx of eddies, and then skill shards will increase your XP with specific skills. So when you defeat enemies, keep an eye out for these when you're actually looting all of the bodies. And generally speaking here, like your eddies should be going into your cyberware for the most part, because of how armor is now tied to your cyberware, and getting those upgrades is really important to improve that, because it helps with your resistances and your overall survivability, just like the body skill does, right? Like a body skill increases your HP, but then armor increases your resistances to those actual damage coming towards you. But you saving up those eddies and bringing them into Phantom Liberty is what you should be doing. But even still, because of the way Cyberware has been changed and completely redesigned, you'll still have access to all of the new Cyberware mods that you can put onto your gear that'll have these stat bonuses that were previously on clothes, as well as being able to attune them to specific attributes to give you further bonuses in that way as well. We'll start with something that happens during the intro missions, and I'm going to avoid spoilers as much as I can, but in the intro missions, you fight a rather large robotic boss, and as soon as you defeat that boss, you can leave the area, but there's also an optional quest objective to take the Chimera core, which you absolutely should do. So what this core does is you can actually use it in your crafting menu to make an insanely powerful mod. You can choose from 4 different options depending on your build and playstyle. If you've got the Firecracker for power weapon mods to shoot explosive weapons. You got Wall Puncher, which is a tech weapon mod that allows you to charge the weapon to 200% without increasing the charge time. Plus it has 100% armor penetration and no penalty for penetrating cover. And there's Hakatomi, the smart weapon mod, so you get a 5% chance to apply a quick hack effect. And Severance, which is a melee weapon mod, so when enemies are below 50% HP, each hit to their head or limbs has a 20% chance to dismember and instantly kill them. The best thing about this mod is that it can be unequipped from weapons as well. So say if you go into Phantom Liberty and you haven't got the best weapons in the world yet, you'll still be able to take this mod off weapons and put it into different ones. Now, the mod you should pick here is really dependent on your playstyle, whether you're using power weapons or tech weapons or smart weapons or melee weapons. That's entirely up to you, but they are all extremely strong, so there's no real wrong answer here. It's just a little annoying that because they are weapon mods, you can't insert them in most of the iconic weapons in the game, as most of the iconic weapons don't have mod slots because they're already iconic, but I guess that would be a little OP, so you'll probably need to put it into some sort of a normal weapon and just add additional mods and, silencers, scopes, that sort of thing onto them, but they're still incredibly powerful, and it essentially just turns any weapon you like into an iconic weapon, so you can get those benefits from it. Right near the casino at the entrance to Dogtown, there is a pool of water. If you swim all the way to the bottom, you'll find an iconic power assault rifle that you can take with you. This assault rifle is a Kyobi variant, and it's like nothing too special if you just sort of look at it, but when you think about it, it's actually great for a power weapon user. So it comes with improved handling, which is nothing to sneeze at. It also has a scope slot and a muzzle slot, which is great. Plus it has 2 mod slots, which is really rare for iconic weapons. So what this means is that you can take this bad boy, and remember the Chimera core we were talking about before, if you wanted to craft the power weapon mod, you can then slot that into this iconic weapon and get that explosive rounds plus this great rifle, and you're essentially essentially good to go. The relic skill tree is a massive buff in Phantom Liberty, and one of the first things you should be doing is going and hunting those relic points. You'll initially get 3 relic points just during the intro mission, and then you can spend that on one of the 3 core perks that you can pick from there. But you'll also be able to find the relic points in Dogtown. These will appear on the map with like the little relic symbol, or if you get close enough to one, they'll actually just appear as well with the icon. Now, there is 12 of these to collect, as you can get every single one of all of the relic perks. So once you've collected all the points, you'll be able to get them all, but any of them are really good, and it's dependent on what your build is, right? Like if you're using a lot of Cyberware, then picking up Jailbreak to give you those benefits to, say, the monowire or the projectile launch system to allow you to shoot multiple projectiles for each time, or if you're just using some sort of a range build, you can go into the vulnerability side of things. But everything here is valuable to pick up, but once you get all of them, you'll definitely be an OP powerhouse. You should be checking all the vendors in Dogtown as well. Now, something that I am a habit of doing is not really checking actual vendors' stock. I would just go to them to dump and sell all the weapons that I have. But in Dogtown, firstly, you should check the junk vendor at the stadium, as you can buy a perk point from him, and he also sells skill shards as well. The Ripper Docs in Dogtown also have iconic cyberware that you can't get anywhere else. So be sure to check both of the Ripper Docs at either end of Dogtown and grab those iconic cyberwares. You'll also be able to buy the new weapons from the vendors, or you can buy their crafting specs as well, which is cheaper than just buying the weapon outright. If you do need eddies, because you will be spending a lot of them in Dogtown, selling weapons is now like super lucrative to actually gain eddies really quickly. So anytime you've defeated enemies, run around and pick up all their weapons and then go back to a vendor and sell them at a later time, because you don't really carry as much now, because clothes you don't find as much. So mostly you'll have a massive carry capacity. You'll be able to just carry a heap of weapons that you find throughout the world, because that won't be cumbersome by the amount of clothes you're carrying, which typically used to happen. And these next 2 will absolutely help you gain eddies as well. And the first is the cargo drop. So occasionally in Dogtown, you will see a drone that will drop a cargo, or you'll actually just see like the red smoke from it already drop. There's also a little sound that like plays when you're near one as well. So just keep an eye out for that sound if you didn't see it drop or you can't see it. Sometimes they'll drop like on buildings or like up high, and you can't actually see the smoke if you're like on the ground level or something. So just pay attention to that sound. But essentially, as soon as you see these, you should book it to them. They don't last forever and will give you at least a really good weapon and some crafting components, among other benefits, as they often do have. There will typically be enemies nearby to kill, and that's just free loot as well as XP, so go and do that. I also got an iconic shotgun on one of my playthroughs from looting one of these cargo drops, but anytime you see them, highly recommend that you go over to them, fight anyone that's there and loot them. You will have to pass the breach protocol just to actually unlock the cargo, which can sometimes be annoying, especially if you're not actually like a quick hack build. But once you have unlocked the cargo, you'll essentially get like a really strong weapon. Like in my case, for my max level character, it's basically always a legendary. You'll get some clothing, potentially like a carry capacity shard or something similar, plus skill shards, plus weapon mods, ammo, and just like a bunch of other consumables as well. And you sort of get this in basically every single one. It's just randomized depending on what you get, but they all have really great rewards from them. Like you'll often get some of the best weapon mods from looting these cargo drops, and it's much better to do that than say try and buy them from vendors. These mods are actually really strong, and it just saves you that cost of having to buy them from vendors, and then you can sell those weapons and mods, etc., if you're not actually going to use them, right? So you can make that money back, and you've got the benefit of going to these locations, looting all the enemies, getting the XP from them, getting those items that you can go and sell for eddies or use yourself. So absolutely well worth doing anytime you see them pop up. The next one is vehicle contracts. Now in Dogtown, you'll notice another new icon on the map that's like a steering wheel. The first one seems to always be in the same spot, but I can't actually confirm that 100%. It has happened for me on 2 different playthroughs that it's in the same spot, so I'll show the map position here. But essentially you'll see like this like flashing icon with a steering wheel, and you go and jump in that car, and El Capitan will call you, and you'll start your first vehicle contract. Essentially what these contracts are is you'll need to hijack a car and bring that car to a designated location. When you do, you'll get a ton of eddies and skill shards and crafting components, and sometimes if you complete the optional objective, you'll also get a discount at the auto fixer terminals. The optional objective changes each mission. Like it could be just getting to the destination within a specific time limit. Sometimes it's avoiding damage to the car itself, or it could just be defeating enemies trying to take you out along the way. Now, while the rewards that you get for completing one of these are great in their own right, right? Like you'll often get skill shards as well as weapons and money shards and crafting components, which are all fantastic. Really, the standout is the auto-fixers discount that you can get at the auto-fixer terminal. So with update 2.0, you would have seen that they are the auto-fixer terminals that you'll find throughout the world. Now, by doing these contracts and completing that optional objective and getting that discount, you can go to these terminals and buy certain cars for 25% off, which is just saving you a bunch of eddies. This is really valuable because there are those new cars that actually are weaponized. So you'll see in the top left icon indicating if it is actually a weaponized vehicle, meaning you won't actually have to use your own weapons when you're in the car. It has, say, rockets or machine guns already attached to it. And by doing these contracts, you'll also unlock new vehicles. So once you've done a certain amount of them, new vehicles will unlock at the auto fixer terminal as well. So there's plenty of reasons to go out and do these, and some of the best cars are now locked behind this, especially some of the new weaponized vehicles with machine guns and rockets and all that stuff. So by doing these, and anytime you see them pop up on the map, go and do these because you get those rewards plus the discounts, and then also you can go and buy these vehicles that you will have unlocked. These contracts won't just appear in Dogtown. I've had them appear or just like out in Night City as well, so just keep an eye on your map for them when they pop up. Lastly, we're going to cover update 2.1. This added a ton of new features to the game that are hugely important that you should know about for any new or returning player as well. Now, what I'm talking about here about this cheeky little line is the Phoenix and Cognito Lattice. I'm probably saying them terribly wrong, but these new cyberware that were added, there were two pieces of new cyberware. Now, the Phoenix is a skeleton piece that is intelligence attuned, and you get 250% RAM regen rate when available RAM is below 7. And the Cognito Lattice is an intercomplementary system piece for intelligence attuned as well, but this one you get 240% armor for this cyberware when available RAM is below 10. So both of these pieces really fit within a Netrunner build. If you think about like my Lucy build, which is actually the footage that you're seeing here, is my Lucy build using both of these new cyberware pieces. And you can see here, if you look at like my armor and my actual regen rate for my RAM, the difference is pretty staggering when this effect actually goes off when your RAM is really low. And what's really valuable about both of these pieces is in both the skeleton and the intercomplementary system, there isn't really much for a Netrunner, and now you've got these two new additions that can really help push your build that little bit further. And one of the big criticisms of the Netrunner build is how the reliance on overclock with 2.0 was, because you really had to rely on overclock, which essentially turns your health bar into additional RAM slots, right? Because your regen rate was pretty low, and with the rebalancing of the quick hacks and how much you actually need in order to use them regularly, you had to rely on that a little bit too much, in my opinion. And now with this extra regen rate from Phoenix, like, it makes such a difference. It's really valuable. What's also huge about this change that went a little bit under the radar was they decreased cyberware capacity costs for a bunch of cyberware, like a huge amount that makes such a difference in terms of how much cyberware you can actually equip. So now it's very easy in a cyberware build to actually fill out every single slot without like really focusing on trying to remove stuff and add stuff and etc. You can become that massive cyberware freak without really having to invest too much into it because of the reduction of the cyberware cost. If you want to build a build for this new cyberware, then I would really be looking at the Lucy build that I put out, which definitely would be the best build. So I'll link that video here for you guys if you want to go and watch that. But essentially that build is a Netrunner build that's focused on using net running plus the mono wire and the benefits you get from the mono wire in 2.0, how you can add a quick hack into that and also be able to like buff your overall regen because of the mono wire when you hit enemies with that and finishes, and how that sort of interlaces with the overall combat. It's a really quality build, and this new cyberware really just makes it sing in such a great way. And you can obviously use it with smart weapons like I am in this footage as well. Like, this is a slight variation where I'm using a bit more range for smart weapons rather than the melee for the mono wire like the Lucy variant, but both work absolutely perfectly and are well worth doing if you wanted to give a crack with these new cyberware. Update 2.1 wasn't even really about this cyberware. This was just a footnote in an otherwise amazing patch. One of the best things that I think, like, huge buff to overall just fun in the game, like straight up, is the radio port. So now you can listen to the radio literally any time throughout the game. Love this change. And you can change the volume as well in the radio section, so if you want it a little louder or quieter depending on where you are in the game as well. And I love the radio and the music in Cyberpunk in the world, so it's really good that they've added this feature. In one of the very first Cyberpunk trailers, we saw the Metro and the player riding the Metro, and now with 2.1 we can actually ride the metro. So now you can use it as a fast travel point, or you can actually just ride the metro and like look out, see some scenic views and see the people on the train. Johnny will like sit around sometimes as well. Actually found this in one of the times when I was getting footage for this video. Johnny's like sitting there real sad, and there's these like paper pigeons around him. Weird, like, but these are like the secrets that they seemingly have added with the metro system, as there's been plenty of little like videos I've seen on the Reddit and stuff of like different things that people have found. And I think that the more people ride the metro, different lines, and the more we spend on there's going to be interesting secrets that we definitely find throughout this. So let me know any interesting things you have found about the metro in the comments as well. One of the biggest immersion changes is that now you can actually hang out with your romantic partner, which didn't make a whole lot of sense before. After you completed like your romantic quests, you just kind of were finished with them. You would get the occasional text and that was about it. But now you can actually hang out with them. So if you boot up a save with update 2.0, you'll actually have a message from your romantic partner asking if you want to hang out. But if you are playing the game separately, you'll be able to do this in other ways as well. And essentially you can invite them to any apartment that you own and go and hang out with them there. There is a ton of different interactions here as well, right? You'll probably see them like sitting on the couch or just doing some sort of activity when you arrive. And depending on the apartment and what the activities are in that apartment, they'll follow you around and interact with objects, look out the window. You can do some stuff in the shower if you want, or any sort of other things, right? Like there's plenty of fun that you can do with them here. It's actually really immersive, I think, on the stuff that's been added. I wonder if they've added new voice lines too. It seems like they have for these partners, but like I don't rightly know. I would be interested to know if anyone actually knows that for sure. But it's a really solid immersion fix, so you can spend more time with these characters that are like the best part of Cyberpunk really is the actual core characters in the game. Bikes no longer feel like trucks when you drive them, which is another change as well. So now with bikes, you can actually maneuver and get off the ground a little bit. So you can lean as well by holding left shift or left control on keyboard or the left stick on the gamepad. You can lean to the left or the right. You can lean back to do a bit of a wheelie. If you get some air going, you can do a little bit of a spin in the air. There's plenty of things that you can do as you sort of move yourself around. And I actually noticed you can sort of grind around corners now properly with the bike. Like if you lean in the right direction, you sort of flip that around the corner. You just ignore me running into stuff here, but you can sort of get that right turns, which is really quite nice, and the bikes feel really, really good. They also added 5 new bikes that are all available through the AutoFixer terminal if you want to buy those. And while you are there in the AutoFixer terminal as well, if you drop all the way down to the other section, you can see the new Porsche that is there. This Porsche looks sick. I love the look of this car, like the yellow back and the yellow like wheel rims. Really, really nice car. In order to get this, you just need to purchase it from the AutoFixer terminal in the other section. It'll actually start a little side quest, which is kind of cute. So I won't really spoil what happens there, but you do a little side quest at the end. You get the car as you did pay for it. And it's a really nice vehicle. So highly recommend doing that if you've got the funds to get. And if you want to take that car into car races, you now can with the new repeatable car races. So essentially, if you want to unlock these, which is I think the main thing that people, and including myself, struggled with, is how to unlock these. You need to wait a certain period of time for Jim Jarry to message you. After they've messaged you, they'll be like, hey, there's new races, you can go and do them. At the locations of where all the original races were, there's now a new icon on the map, and if you go there, you'll immediately just start a quest to like start the race. What's interesting here as well is that Johnny will join you on these races and talk to you during them. And I don't think these are new voice lines. They seem like old voice lines from Keanu Reeves, but it's still fun to have that sort of interaction with him. What makes these races just so much better than launch, and just in general, that now that you can repeat them, is that you've got all that vehicle and car combat now. So, you can use the Sandevistan while you're driving. You've got vehicles that have guns on them, so you can blow up all of your, competitors, so you have no way of losing, right? Like it's fun. Like it's just straight fun. And that's the main thing that you can ask for Cyberpunk, right? It's just fun content to do and repeatable content, right? You can go and do these. And I did the city center race here, and it was 2,000 eddies to enter, and I won 10,000 for coming first. So there's definitely some eddies to be made there if you want to win some races. But I'll link the patch notes in the comments down below if you guys want to see the full list of patch notes for Cyberpunk, as there are some other things I haven't touched on, like gangs will now chase you at the end of missions sometimes, and a few other little things. But really, this patch is filled with like immersion stuff and just like little tweaks and things that really make it feel like a complete game. I honestly think like it really is now the game that I think we all thought it was going to be, with all of the changes we've had through you know, since launch with update 2.0 since then, and Phantom Liberty, and now 2.1. Like, you know, credit to CDPR and the stuff they've done with this game. Like, it's definitely one of the best games on the market nowadays, and I think I'm going to do a new review of this complete package now that it is finished, I think. So let me know if you guys are interested in that in the comments down below and what you think of update 2.1. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.